Hey everybody, thanks for coming out today. Obviously this is the Race and Poetry panel since it's 3 o'clock. I'm just going to do a quick intro of everybody, read their bios very quickly, and then we have a few people who want to make some opening statements. To my right is Christopher Stackhouse. He's the author of the poetry collection Slip and co-author of Seismosis, which features a collaboration of his drawings with text by writer-author Professor John Keane. Next to him is Timothy Liu. He has 2 new books of poetry forthcoming, Bending the Mind Around the Dream's Blown Fuse and Polytheogomy, and he lives in Manhattan, which is, yes. We just had a different conversation about it. Anyway, next to him is Meghan Punschke. Yep. I've only known her for several years. Meghan Punschke is the author of Stratification, which just came out this year. She resides in New York City and has just completed her MFA in poetry from the New School. She's the curator of and host of Word of Mouth, a reading series. I'll just sit on you. Dedicated to Word of Mouth curator and host, and she's also the managing editor for the literary journal Oranges and Sardines. Next to Megan is Mindi Obadike, and she's the author of Armor and Flesh, Poems and the Liberato for the internet opera, the Sour, I said Liberato. Libretto, the Sour Thunder.
It's like Liberace.
I'm trying to cut people's bios, but of course it's just not working. For the internet opera, the Sour Thunder, the Whitney Museum of American Art, Yale University, and the New York African Film Festival, and Electronic Arts. I've pulled this bio and obviously put a lot of stuff in here. I know she has a new kind of EP out called Document that she put together with her husband, her partner, Keith, who's here too. I just saw him. And next to her is Jennifer Firestone. Please be a short bio. Jennifer Firestone is the co-editor of Letters to Poets, Conversations about Poetics, Politics, and Community, which I've actually seen an early copy of, and it's really wonderful, and I highly recommend it. Not that the other poets don't have great books too. It's forthcoming this month, next month in October, and a bunch of other stuff. Just Google her if you're interested. Mathias Spalina is co-editor of Octopus Books and Magazine, and he's the author of the chapbooks Why I Am White, Creation Myths, and The Viral Lease, and a bunch of other stuff. Just Google him. And I am Amy King, and you can just Google me. It's behind you. Oh, God. You know, that's why. I was like, should I not be here? Tisa Bryant is, you can just see 1:15 p.m. if you want to know. I don't have a bio here because, actually, she has a wonderful book that she doesn't have in her hand. It's over there. And it's called Unexplained Presence. And she just read from it, and so I don't have a bio. But she's a great poet. And she's actually read in my series, so I read a bio for you once, so it's cool.
That was me yelling David Larson at the top of the stairs.
Okay. And, yes, so we have a few people who are going to make some opening remarks. I'm trying to keep these short. I'll just sit here for a second. We'll go around the room. Mathias, you can start with your opening remarks.
All right. I started crossing out most of my opening remarks. I'm sorry. I think I'm here because of that chapbook, the Why I'm White chapbook. It's a long poem about thousands of people who are all me, who are all white. And what I'm interested in right now is building an ethics of contemporary American surrealism, and to try and use a rationality and a lack of logic to understand ethics. And I'm going to just kind of poke through a couple of the things I have here that I haven't crossed out. It's sort of a notes board. Cultural hierarchy, of course, depends on the illusion of a stable center. And through this illusion, the privilege anointed to whites in America can seem appropriate, justified, normal. And as what Eduardo Glissant, author of the Poetics of Relation, points out, this is the logic of plantation. The stable center of American culture is anti-atavistic. There's a cultural resistance to recognitions of origins, and therefore an ongoing work of ignoring oppression. Conflicts of race and class are willfully ignored, and at the same time violently contested. At the same time, they're given a government-approved language of multicultural acceptance. And what I'm interested in is how experimental poetics, in any form, is a resistance to the center, a resistance to the norm. So from absurdism to process poetry to surrealism, any kind of poetry that is against the personal narrative. And I had this anecdote that happened this week that was a kind of banal moment of race being aware in life. I was at the Kinko's, and this woman had her bags spread out. Clearly someone lives in the streets. And two white guys came by, and they were sitting down to work, and one of them pushed her bags, and she started to yell. She got very angry. She said the cops had been treating her like shit. She said that, she said a lot of things. She said a lot of profanities. She moved from talking about her educational place and people's reaction to it to this kind of unspooling moment where she was yelling about how the cops are stealing her art out of her bags and becoming millionaires by selling her art. And then, of course, the cops showed up because they'd been called. And they grabbed her bags, which contained her art, and roughly escorted her out of the Kinko's. And at the same moment, I was photocopying for my students out of the Norton Anthology this section of Frederick Douglass's autobiography where he talks about learning to read. And later that day I thought if I was a personal narrative poet, I would go home and I would write a poem in which this became a display of American race from my white male perspective. And the moment of personal narrative there would transform this woman into a symbol of a woman, would make meaning out of the fact that I had Frederick Douglass's words in my hand at the moment this was going on, transforming Frederick Douglass into an idea of Frederick Douglass. And this all seemed to be the process of, through sympathy, through a liberal-leaning idealism, replicating the process of the cops walking in and pulling her away. That these people, who are people in interaction, in conflict in the world, would become symbolic. And as the center of a white male perspective, I would be able to hold the key to how they are metaphors. I could have written a better poem, maybe. Probably not. But there was a clear logic of how a personal narrative poem would arrive out of that. And that's the kind of way that I think my original title for this was Straight White Males Should Stop Writing Personal Narrative Poetries of Epiphanies. So I want experimental poetics to destabilize the myth of the center. And I want that myth decentered both by those who are oppressed by the functions of the stable center and those who gain cultural privilege from the stable center. And I think that this is a moment of recognizing irrationality, recognizing the surrealist logic of human interaction on a daily basis. That as much as we may understand, as much as we may look face to face, we're always creating metaphors and always creating illusions about each other. And I think that there's a strange tradition in 20th century, at least, white experimental poetry of applauding themselves for looking toward the other and creating a sense of difference. But from Eliot's and Ginsberg's seeking an Orientalist idea of transcendence to Pound's and Rothenberg's creation of appreciation anthologies, they always pull the other back to the white center. And it presumes that the center does not contain difference, that there's no other to the center. And what I love about the potential for a destabilized experimental poetics and thinking about race is that the center is always broken. The center is always shown to be a myth. And so it's one destabilized node speaking to another destabilized node. And there's not a lot of, when I look at white so-called experimental poets, there's not a lot of talking about race. And that, when I see that, it seems to me that they're writing all their poems with, those old flesh-colored crayons, They don't have them anymore, but when I was growing up, that was the flesh color, And I'm sure you remember that. And I always think that that's the ink color of poems that don't recognize race. So I'm going to stop there.